Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday, best day. Not just because it's Friday, but because it's Fundraisers Friday with Tony Beall. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much, Julia. Happy Friday. It's always great to see you and dive into these topics. I love it. Always looking forward to it.
I love it too because I find that you educate me, but more than anything, you excite me and you give me the prospect of success, right? And as fundraisers don't always get that. I mean, fundraising can be so tough. And so to have this day where you lean in, you inspire, and you educate, it's magical. And today we're going to be talking about grant writing and grant readiness. A lot of fundraisers, I mean, they get pulled into this piece. Not everybody can be as blessed as having a grant writer on their team.
Yeah, very true. Again, we always talk about being mindful of our audience, representing small, medium, and large size organizations. And to your point, when I first leapt into the development space, I had to learn how to write grants because it needed to happen internally. There weren't resources to outsource this type of service.
No, yeah, it's crazy. Well, I say this every time we do a show about grants, but I live in a state where our governor was the grant writer for what was at the time the largest domestic violence shelter in America, based in my community. I served on the board and the executive committee, and she was our grant writer, and she was like the woman that kept the oil in the machine, right? With all the other things that had to go on, and now she is our governor. So, and she's doing a fabulous job. So I'm just saying, grant writers are amazing human beings. Another thing that's amazing are the people that work with us day in and day out. And they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leader, Fundraisers Friday, which is today, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. Again, I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, joined today by the amazing Tony Beall, Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy. Okay, this is one of the first places to start. Hello, what? There are grant cycles and grant fits? What does that look like?
What is that? Is there actually a process to this? What? So grant cycles and grant fits, and this is something that you learn over time, or you learn from folks that have been in this space for a while. So again, kind of reflecting on my journey in development and learning how to write grants, I didn't know that there were cycles until I started doing my research and diving in. And then you will understand that there's a cycle, and those cycles often depend on the type of community that you're serving. And what I mean by that is when I reflect on the cycle for our local community foundation, there is a time period in which they are accepting grants for arts and culture. There's a separate time where they're receiving grants for social service organizations. There's a separate time where they're receiving grants for LGBTQ plus organizations. So and that makes sense. They don't want to have one cycle for everybody and get inundated with all of these requests at the same time. But it is important to, as part of your research, to understand the cycle. And one of the values of understanding the cycle is so that you can really plan and manage your bandwidth and your time as you're working on developing your story and stating your case within your grant.
So Tony, let me ask a follow-up question to this grant cycle issue, and that is, this is self-imposed. So your community foundation determined this, but a family foundation down the way might have something totally different, right? There's not a seasonality to this. It's more forward-facing to that organization, right?
So true. Yes, it's based on the funder, what that cycle might look like. And it's interesting, Julie, I wasn't sure in today's conversation if there would be a place for me to kind of interject this. But I think what you said is really important. when we talk about grants and the grant cycle, that every funder has a different cycle. Even more stressful is that every funder has a different grant process. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all come together in some way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
come up with a similar grant process across the country? Maybe there's 3 different processes, but as opposed to having 3,000 or 5,000 or whatever that might be, the process is often super intimidating. And again, really inconsistent amongst funders. So I would love to see, at a minimum, some type of cohesion around what that grant application process looks like for funders.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because that's one of the challenges for having your volunteers, and sometimes it might be, people outside your development team, and a lot of times it's a development team of one who's like, I need help, and then board members pick it up or whatever, and then they're like, oh, okay, how hard can this be? And then it's like really hard, because no two grants are the same. It's really, really hard. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Let's talk about this digital wall, grant portals. I mean, since we're online with that, and you're talking about the process, it seems to me that this was where we were going, and then COVID hit, and it just really amplified the need or the process for foundations to say, we're going to run through this process through a portal. And it's frustrating for a lot of organizations, because then they call it the digital wall, right? It's like they can't break through it because there's nobody to call or talk to. They can't get somebody to visit on their campus. What are you thinking about when it comes to this?
Well, one is I do celebrate the fact that we have digitized the process and that there is a portal for most applications. I could tell you that not that long ago, I had to submit a grant and I had to provide 10 printed hard copies, the grant on a CD. I mean, and it had to be postmarked and mailed, and also and all of that stuff. So not everyone has digitized their funding or moved to that type of online portal. So I celebrate that, and in many ways it does make it easier for folks that are applying. I think that the digital wall is higher or lower dependent upon the funder. So a lot of corporations, larger entities like that are going to have a higher digital wall. And it may be more difficult for you to connect with someone to build, a reputation with them, or a relationship. With family foundations, community foundations, what I find is that they're much more accessible. A lot of family foundations and community foundations will in fact host some type of Q&A for the funding before they actually release the application, so that you can participate in some type of learning about the grant. What is the application process? What are the things that they're really looking for? Again, understanding what the grant is looking for and what they want to fund is really critical, again, so that you're not wasting your time or their time in reviewing applications that you wouldn't qualify for. So again, where maybe 20 years ago, the feeling was that, some of these funders are sitting in an ivory tower and totally inaccessible. That is not the case in today's environment. So you'll know very soon, let me say, when you lean into the process, how accessible they'll be. But I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Most folks will be pleasantly surprised at how accessible some of these funders and their key contacts are.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like there's a shift afoot. I had the most interesting opportunity to meet with a CEO of a major funder in my community yesterday, as a matter of fact, for breakfast. Her organization manages $1.5 billion in assets. And I asked her what was her one big thing that if she could communicate out to the nonprofit sector, of our community where we live and serve. I said, what would it be? And she said, Tony, and this was not what I expected. She said that we are accessible, that we want to meet you, we want to know you, we want to tour your property, or we want you to come here. And I was like, I actually said to this lovely woman who I've known for years, I was like, is that really true? Because if you start spreading that word, the gates are going to open. And she's like, no, we really do. She said, we've been closed down because of COVID, because of previous approaches and management. And she's like, no, we need to get out. We need to see what's going on, and we need to hear from the nonprofit sector. And I just thought that was joyful. It was a little radical because I thought, how in the hell are you going to do this in a state that has about 30,000 registered nonprofits? It was really, really interesting, Tony. And it was great news, right? It was great news to hear this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that really supports when we talk about the best way to find solutions for communities is to involve the people that are impacted by those scenarios or situations in which we're trying to find a solution. Mm-hmm. So I think that behavior of that foundation totally supports that, and that they want to hear from the folks that are not only trying to solve the problem, but folks that are dealing with the problem and whose lives are impacted by the problem. So congratulations to her and that foundation. That's definitely, and why wouldn't you, as a funder who's investing in a community need and a community solution, why wouldn't you want to hear from everybody? Why wouldn't you want every possible solution presented to you? So that you can make sure that you're investing in the one that's going to have the most impact, or the one that's going to support the immediate needs of the community versus something that might not be as urgent.
Yeah, I love it. And I think it's a new dawn for transparency and relationships. And so I think that's like super, super amazing. Let's talk about a little bit in moving about the grant application and itself. And in crafting a compelling grant, I feel like there's two streams of thought here. And you tell me what you think is more appropriate. It's like sexy, dazzling, woohoo, entertaining, or it's just pro forma. And it seems like you have two approaches. And I'm wondering what you think about that. Given also, too, that there's a time of change, right? I mean, what you did over the trajectory of 20 years has changed. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I always feel like a grant is the perfect combination of style and substance.
Okay.
So a grant needs to tell a story and evoke an emotion.
Okay.
But it also needs to include metrics and measurements. So what is the data behind your request? How have you determined that this is a community need? What data supports that? And as you are addressing the data through your program that you're looking to have funded, how are you measuring its success? And how often are you measuring it? And what are the ways in which you're measuring it? What do you anticipate the outcomes to be? So it really is that great, collaboration of style, telling a story, evoking an emotion, and saying these are just the hard facts. This is just the realness of the scenario and why we need to do this. So those two buckets, Julia, that you mentioned, I think are absolutely correct. Mm-hmm. It's a really good marriage of those two. And that's why, really successful grant writers are great storytellers.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say the data's the data. There's not much you can do about that. But you can, how you tell the story is really important.
Yeah. Well, and how you convey the data points. One of our new partners, Clear Impact, who deals with data management and communicating data. One of the things that Adam Luking has said, which is very interesting, is that don't just flood people with data. Step back, find like 3 to 5 really important pieces of that data and then explore that, right? Really make it meaningful so that people can remember it and then attach a value to it versus just getting, the fire hose approach where we'll just send everything out. It doesn't work, right? It's just human nature. We're not going to be able to navigate that.
I think it's, Julia, what you just said is important. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but being mindful of the audience and if you can, sometimes you can learn who is going to be reading the grant. So a good example might be a lot of times like an arts and culture council within your county might be offering some funding, and there's going to be a committee of 5 or 7 people that are going to read your grant, and they're going to score it, and then all the scores are going to be tabulated, and that's what's going to determine whether or not you get funding. So to your point, Julia, where you put in data, how you display it, how much of it that you display, I think one, considering what are the requirements of the grant and what are they asking for, but then considering your audience and being mindful of the fact that most of the time an individual is reading this.
It's so fascinating that you said that, because I was just a part of a jury for an award situation, a grant situation with a sizable award, and talking to my fellow jurors. And I didn't know if this was, and I still don't know if this was bad or good, but we didn't just read the applications. We all independently, before we came together as a group, we were online. We went to their websites. We went to their LinkedIn profiles. We did additional, if you will, research or connectivity in a digital format to kind of help amplify what our decisions were. So it wasn't just that application. And the application was well done. It was arduous. But I think the gravitas of the jury, and like you just said, the people reading these applications and making these pretty profound decisions, because I think anybody who serves in that capacity realizes that these grants are game changers for these organizations and the communities that they support. All of us wanted to make sure that we were educated, we were making the right decision, we were informed about what the connecting points were. So we didn't just use those applications.
See, and that's interesting because I participate in a local award ceremony for nonprofits, and I serve as the judge's liaison. So if the judges have any questions about an application they receive, or if someone submitting an application has any questions, they can reach out to me. And I do that on a volunteer basis for like 10 years now. I just absolutely love it. But our judges cannot and are asked not to do any additional research, and that their decision must solely be based on the application and how well that organization has represented themselves through that process.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to explore this because, all the judges did this independently. We didn't talk about it. And I appreciate you saying something. I'm going to have to, there were parts, that we had to judge based on the application, but to get a sense of what the organization did and how they were doing it, we investigated, using our own sources. Wow. Okay. Whoops. Yay or nay? I don't know.
I don't know. I wish I had the yay or nay paddle. I don't know. I'd be flipping it around. I think it just, it depends on the organization. I think it depends on what you're funding and the magnitude of the gift through the grant. So I see both ways. Being who I am, I would naturally want to Google them and go to the website and look at the social media and all of that stuff. But in this particular scenario, the judges are asked not to do any of that and to solely rate the organization based on how well they have submitted the data.
Okay. Wow. So now I'm going to have that. I'll report back to everybody on what that process is, because we'll be talking about grants again. I mean, this is a concept that I feel like is picking up. I think there are more family foundations being formed, DAFs, all of that ecosystem that is really digitally pushed and through these portals. And then, of course, a mass amount of money that's being transferred, across the demographics in America. This is something that is really amping up, I should say, right? I mean, we need to be having these conversations, because those nonprofits that figure out how to perform in the grant ecosystem are going to be better for it, right? I mean, this isn't a one-off. It really, really isn't. Um, let's move on to something that is what happens when you don't win. In the green room, you talked about boards saying, well, isn't there a grant for this? Oh my God. Yeah, we hear this all the time. Talk to us about, like, what's the reality of winning a grant? What happens when you don't? Do you just be like, bummer, and you move on? Or what can you do?
Yeah, I've worked with I'm going to take a little bit of a step back and just say I've worked with organizations where 95% of their funding came from grant sources.
Ooh, okay.
And these are mostly social service organizations. So
Mhm.
then what happens is uh, something changes at the state level. I'm talking mostly government grants.
Sure.
Uh, then something changes in the budget, and it's like, we've been granted this amount of money for 15 years, but
It's all gone.
this year we're only getting 50% of what we used to receive. What are we going to do?
To do.
Now we're in crisis mode.
Right.
So that's just a reminder that grants are part of your fundraising ecosystem, right? They're part of your diverse portfolio
Mhm.
of funding for your organization. So just always keep that in mind when you're going down the grant road,
Mhm.
that it's part of a larger funding, diverse portfolio. So
Mhm.
what do you do if you don't get the grant? Well, you need to just determine how important is this program or project that you're seeking funding for. And my
Mhm.
assumption would be, if it's super important, that you have, in addition to applying for grants, activated all of these other lanes that you have for fundraising within your organization. So that's my answer. It's not, there's no crystal ball needed. It's just you determine how important is it, and look for other funding sources or activate the other opportunities that you have to raise funds in your organization to get the funding that you need for this important program.
So, what do you think about reconnecting with that grantor and saying what happened? Not like in a punitive situation, but asking for clarity or clarification on why you weren't a good fit. Should you try again? Never darken my door. I mean, again, really, like, is that good? Is that poor behavior or good behavior? What does that look like to you?
I think that that's really good behavior. And
Okay.
that goes back to what we were saying just a few minutes ago about the approachability of funders today versus historically. Uh, I, you have to be really mindful of your approach. Like you said, Julia, you still want to approach the donor with nothing but gratitude, because
Mhm.
although you may not have received funding, thank goodness they're there to fund other organizations and help lift up other programs and services, you know, in communities where it's needed. So it's a shame I didn't get funded, but thank goodness you do what you do.
Yeah.
Uh, and then to make sure that you're asking in a way in which they're understanding that you're a lifelong learner. You want to learn so that you can do better, not only for
Yeah.
maybe another grant submission to them, but so that you can do better for other grants that you might submit to other funders.
Mhm.
So it's all about relationships in this scenario, how close you are to the funder, how accessible are they, and then just making sure that your approach still comes from a place of abundant gratitude
Yeah.
and a desire to be better. And I think that you would be pleasantly surprised at the really valuable feedback and responses that you'll receive.
I love that you said that. I love that you uh, framed it up by that gratitude moment, that no matter what it is that happened to you in your organization, ultimately the community wins. Might not be something that directly impacted your organization, but it directly impacts your community, which is a win for everybody. So I love that ethos, really. An approach. I think that's the right way to go.
And we see more and more funders that are funding collaborative grants. So where there are two or more organizations coming together to meet
Yeah.
a community need. So do your diligence, do your research, look at organizations that might have been very successful in grant funding that you can collaborate with
Yeah.
to help build your credibility with some of these funders in a collaboration so that down the road you can submit an application on your own and your credibility will already have been built with that funder through your successful collaborations.
Yeah, I think that's super wise. I think that wisdom can take you to a much greater opportunity. And I also think, Tony, that funders talk. So funders go to events, they have their own ecosystem, they have their own trainings, roundtables, and you never know where your introduction gets made to another funder that ends up building something that you hadn't anticipated. Or if you've had a reputational issue, or you've had something that didn't maybe fit well, maybe that gets course corrected, right?
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up because a lot of funders are part of a regional or state association
yeah.
and they connect regularly. They typically have some type of annual conference where all of the funders come together. And I'm happy to say that in my community here in South Florida, I know funders that have received funding applications and reached out to the applicant and said, I think organization or foundation A, B, and C is a better fit for you.
What?
Think about applying to them, and I'm going to make an introduction. So I mean, that's really collaboration at one of its greatest levels when funders are collaborating to that degree, where they're referring organizations to one another. Again, all in the spirit of serving community and meeting community needs.
Right. Well, as you always remind us, Tony, this is about relationships. The secret sauce is about relationships. And if you can steward yourself and your organization with that in mind, you're always going to be ahead, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
you're always going to be ahead. I also think that's just a dang good way to live, too.
It sure is.
Wow. Well, this has been amazing. Another great episode with Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy himself, the amazing Tony Beall. I'm coming to us from South Florida, but really, I feel like you come to us from the universe, because you have such a rich level of experience and connectivity across the globe. And this has been really, really great. Thank you, Tony, so much for sharing this time and expertise with us. We have amazing presenting sponsors that allow for these conversations. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Letter, Nonprofit Thought Leader.
It's
And
Friday.
I know, woo! And I haven't even started drinking yet. Fundraisers Friday, your part-time controller, third sector company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that really join us day in and day out so we can have these magical conversations. Okay, it's Friday, but we still have a lot of work to do. And you have helped us understand, Tony, how grants can fit in and how we can be more prepared to be successful with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun. Hey, everybody, as we end each and every episode of the Nonprofit Show, we leave with this message. And it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Tony.